Hello, beautiful soul, and welcome to another episode of Intuitive Creator Spotlight. I am Stella, your host, and in this playlist, I invite beautiful guests who transform their lives by embracing their gifts, their paths, and now are on a journey to help other people change their lives too. So today, I have here with me the amazing Stephanie. She is a qualified coach and NLP practitioner. She is also an advocate for compassion, personal choice, and real life change. Stephanie is a founder of the Women Who Don't Drink. It's a powerful movement, and this movement started as a supportive community. Since then, it evolved into a transformative platform, and I know that she's going to tell us all about that. Hi, Stephanie, welcome to this interview.
Hello, thank you very much.
I'm super happy to have you here because I think what you do is so important, especially for this day and age, and especially after we've been through years of COVID and so much more, where people were stuck in their homes, and it's just easy to just binge watch something or eat something or drink something, and you just, before you know it, it transforms into something that it is a habit. So tell us, how has your experience been over these years with your clients or people coming into your world? What have they been telling you related to their addictions or these habits?
Gosh, lots of things. And you're absolutely right. COVID was a whole thing for sure. So, yeah, I mean, people have always struggled with alcohol and substances, particularly alcohol, because alcohol is legal and readily available. It's one of those, alcohol is such a funny drug because it's legal. And actually, we say alcohol and drugs, which we shouldn't say. We should just say drugs. And people don't even see alcohol as a drug. Like if I'm delivering a workshop and I say, so who takes drugs? People will be like, oh God, Stephanie's talking about drugs. Don't say anything. And they'll be like, no, no, we would never take drugs. And I'll say, well, who drinks alcohol? And like most of the room does. And it's like, okay, well, you're all drug users, but nobody wants to say that like it's a derogatory thing. It's a factual thing. You're using a substance. So it's just a really funny little thing, and it's packaged up lovely, and it's readily available, and it's cheap, and it's socially acceptable, and you're actively encouraged to take it. And unfortunately, it happens to be one of our most harmful substances. And humans have always loved to take substances. There's nothing wrong with that. We've always wanted to seek out pleasure and alleviate pain. And if we're given something that's a quick fix like alcohol, then we're going to use it. That's just the way that we are. It's just we're in this funny situation with alcohol. And then COVID, as I'm sure you're aware, everybody's aware that it did very strange things, didn't it, to lots of different people. So people had a very different experience. It was that real sort of change in values. Some people went from being out of the home and working a lot to being in the home, still working a lot or not working, having children at home, homeschooling. There was loads of things that happened in that change of life. Some people had money and didn't have to worry. Some people had no idea where they were going to get money from, and they were really scared. So we had people that were drinking before COVID, and because of that massive change, so imagine you have a really busy job and it's really stressful, and then all of a sudden you're at home and you haven't got so much to do. We had people that actually stopped drinking because of that lifestyle change. And then you had people that alcohol wasn't really a problem. And then COVID hit, and it's like, oh, we're at home all the time. We can drink whatever we want. And alcohol became a problem. So you had those real sort of like extremes. And then some people will have naturally, as life changed again after COVID, they will have naturally made changes. And then some people have found themselves stuck there. So yeah, it is the rich tapestry of human beings.
Very interesting for sure, because then different people, and we are all unique. We all have our
Yes.
own experiences. We will react to situations in life differently. And
Yep.
it is so great to have a place where you can come and feel that you're safe and you can share your experience and talk about your story as well, because there is always a story as to why somebody starts a particular path in their life. So, what do you say or think inspired you to create Women Who Don't Drink? Because this is such a powerful name. It is a powerful name and a powerful movement too. So what inspired you to create it?
Yeah, it's like it would be interesting for you actually because of the whole intuition piece, like what you think about it. Because for me, it's like a serendipity. It's not so much. It wasn't. I didn't plan it out. It wasn't like a vision. It was like a sequence of events. So I was using alcohol a lot, problematically, also different substances off and on, from a teenager. And sometimes that was okay, and sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes I was out of control. Um, and then I got arrested for an alcohol related offence. And I had a bit of an epiphany while I was in custody. That sort of like, first of all, I was quite angry, what am I doing here? Or how dare they? That real sort of like victim stuff. And then after a while, it was like, well, hang on a minute, what has happened? What are the sequence of events that led up to this? And it was a real sort of like, well, I'm the common denominator. It's me. So I had a bit of a like, okay, I got myself here, I can get myself out of it. I'm 100% responsible for my life. And that was huge for me. It sounds ridiculous, but it was massive. And sort of when I came out of there, I vowed to stop drinking and taking drugs and sort my life out. No small feat, but I knew it had to start with particularly the drinking. Um, and that's what I did. And that was like 19 years ago. And I wasn't really thinking about changing my job or anything. I had a good job. I was manager of a small charity that I loved. But then because of that, I became curious about different therapeutic interventions in human behavior and started doing lots of training and lots of NLP training, and then decided I wanted to do some more therapeutic work rather than management work. And there was a job that came up running a treatment service in a children's secure unit. And little did I know, no one else applied for the job. I was the only person that went. I really wanted it, but they weren't sure because I had a criminal record. And they were very touchy about that, wanting to know about my past and stuff. And I think it's one of those things where they're like, well, no one else has applied. We need to give her a chance. So they gave me a chance and I smashed it. I loved the job. I went in all in and did my best. And one of the hardest jobs I've ever done. I really loved it. But if anything's going to break you, working in a children's prison is going to, that's going to do. It's pretty hardcore. And then I just literally did every job. It wasn't, again, none of this was premeditated because they're all temporary contracts because it's charities and the NHS and it's treatment services. Um, so I just did all these different temporary contracts. When a contract ran out, I'd be like, go and do that, I'll go and do that. And then I ended up running treatment services, just sort of going up and up and up. Again, not really that premeditated. Ran 3 different treatment services, 2 of which were alcohol specific, and loved it, absolutely loved it, until I just didn't love it, until it was, okay, this is really not working for me anymore. Like really, like in the extreme, doing 18 hours a day and crying and just like not being able to make it work, not in charge of my budget or my staff team, not being able to hire and fire. Like contracts changed, the organizations changed, and it was just horrendous. People dying on the waiting list, and there was nothing I could do about it. My hands were tied. It was really awful. So I just handed my notice in. And I didn't have a job to go to. I didn't have any money. Everybody was like, so Steph, have you got a rich husband? And I was like, no. And they're like, are you mortgage free? I was like, no. They're like, have you got loads of money? I was like, no. Have you got a job to go to? I was like, no. And everybody's looking at me like I'm completely mental. But as soon as I made that decision, I knew it was the right decision for me. And I have never looked, I mean, it was a hard decision because I'd given so much to treatment services and I loved it, and the staff teams and the clients and everything. But it was like, no, that's it, I'm done. This isn't okay for me at all. And I was vocal about it as well. I was honest. So I tried to make things, get things to change. And I literally then just spent a couple of months figuring out what am I going to do next. And I decided to do, it was about the same time as 1 Year No Beer and Club Soda. It was funny, there must have been something in the air. We all set up at the same time. And I just decided to create a video coaching program based on everything that I knew that worked. So, because my whole thing was about confidential, accessible, affordable, just thinking about women like me. You don't want to go to your doctor, you don't want to walk into a 12-step group, and you're definitely not going to go to a treatment service. So, what are you going to do? You haven't got loads of money for a private therapist. So I did that. And as you know, that's just the start, isn't it? Because I had no idea about running a digital business. And that was it from that moment on. It was like literally trying everything. And it was I set up a free Facebook group in 2017, which was 2 years after I created the program. And that just exploded into this community. And the community was called Women Who Don't Drink. And that's where it all came from, that it was that, okay, it's the community aspect that I love. It's this is the bit I do really well, and listening to the community and what they wanted, and everything has come as a result of that, essentially.
Wow, what a story. And yes, like you said, it is a sequence of events now when
Yeah.
you look back at it, but it's like your soul was guiding you every single step. And also the decision, that decisive moment for you of like, you know what, this is not working and I'm just gonna
Yeah.
see what's there for me, what else is there for me. It is just showing how strong you were at that point with who you are, and like you were knowing yourself so well, you knew that this is not for you and this is something that needs to change. And yes, I absolutely can. I can see why you say that you enjoy this aspect of being in a community and guiding people, because I know how amazing you are and at keeping people accountable for their
Yeah.
actions and what they said
Right.
they're going to do, but at the same time, feeling people, making people feel so safe. And especially when it comes to addiction, there is a lot of like shame around addiction, you know, in society, and people will tell, oh yeah, that person does that. And like I've had multiple conversations about this with people who help those in positions of addiction, of being in addiction. um, how do you help those people who have been shamed for their addiction to feel safe when they come in your space?
Yeah. So language is a huge thing. It's a massive thing. And actually somebody's just done a piece of research on it and published a document basically explaining about the language that we should be using when we're describing people's experiences. But really, we don't need a document. It's as simple as just using plain English. People talk about addicts. We're not addicts, we're humans. It's people. And I don't get it right all the time. I get corrected on stuff, if I'm writing things or writing training. Like I recently did one and I was calling people clients, and my supervisor was like, let's call them people. And I was like, yes. Why am I not just doing that naturally? It's so funny how we get caught up in this language. So for starters, if anybody signs up for Women Who Don't Drink, they can see that the language is really plain and simple. We're not using words. You might see me and hear me say addiction sometimes, but I'm not using labels. I'm not using alcoholic or addict, or, it's not, because we're all human beings, there, but for the grace of God go I, for anything, we're not in control, even though we think we are. There's, lots of different things that can happen throughout our life, and we are not our behavior. And I'm a big fan of, okay, so this is a problem, right? Let's do some learning about that. And then let's make some changes. And, we can support you with that. And we can support you with learning about your behavior and about human behavior and how that applies to you. So essentially, the frame is learning, because humans are learning machines. And you can evidence that. You can, if you've got a 30-year-old woman sat in front of you who's mortified, why am I drinking? I feel terrible. What's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. You're a human being. Humans have taken substances since the beginning of time. We always will do. We want to alleviate pain and we want to experience pleasure. Alcohol is aggressively marketed to you, aggressively marketed. You did not stand a chance, but now you are here and it's a problem. Let's deal with it because you are 100% responsible. And then that's where the education piece comes in. And you're like, you've learned how to parent, you've learned languages, you've learned how to use a computer, you've learned your job. There's all these amazing things you've learned. You are a learning machine. This is a new thing you're going to learn about alcohol. And then you're going to learn about you and human behavior. And we're going to keep looking at that. And we're going to just review and just keep applying it. And that's why we've got the accountability set up as we have, the accountability group, because we've been, well, in some shape or form, we've been going for 10 years really, but the accountability group's been going for 6 years. And that's because of listening to the people, the dog, listening to the people we work with, about what works. So like, we know that, okay, online coaching programs are great, but we know not everyone's going to do that. In fact, very few people will. We know that, like, from doing Published Expert, people need a live component. They need to talk to people and they need that Zoom call. Like you say, they need that encouragement, that motivation, the learning, but then also the online communities as well, because people need to talk when they need to talk. Not Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. They might have a problem at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. So they need to be able to check in. So we've sort of listened and tweaked to make it work for them. But the language is a huge part of it, and the education is a huge part of it. The embarrassment and guilt and shame is massive, and it's massive for women, very much so. But unfortunately, that's how alcohol works. It's alcohol impacts on our brain chemistry, so it can create depression and anxiety and all those negative thoughts. That's part of the education piece where you're like, okay, you feel rubbish and you're giving yourself a hard time, but you're drinking. This is what the drug does. So let's get you a juice, let's get some alcohol-free days, and then let's teach you how to look after yourself and see how you feel. 9 times out of 10, 2 to 3 weeks in, people feel so much better. Then we can start tackling the other stuff. But while people are drinking, it's really difficult.
Yeah, so that's absolutely correct. The fact that, people will come to you and they will tell you, okay, this is my load of problems. And yes, they may start with, that's what I'm doing, as in that's my habit, or they may say that's my problem. And then I created that habit as a result of my problem. And either way, we know that consuming alcohol like a lot doesn't do any good to anyone. And so I just love your approach because it's so loving and kind. And at the same time, that accountability piece is huge because yes, people will want to come and tell you about their problems, and they will also want to come and celebrate when they achieved certain success, like, hey, I managed to do this for a week or 2 weeks. And it's huge when you have someone to celebrate something like this with, because imagine if they, especially if they've done it for years and years and they've been in the same circles, how can they go back to those circles when the habit is still there to celebrate the fact that they've been like 1 week or 2 week alcohol free, for example? And so I love what you're doing, and I think it's so super important. And I know that in your guidance, in the work that you do, you encourage people to really understand what the alcohol is about and what it's
Yeah,
doing for us.
yeah.
Why do you think, as I know you mentioned a little bit, but what do you think this knowledge is so empowering and so important?
Well, education for anything is key, isn't it? Knowledge is power. And unfortunately, we're not educated about alcohol. And well, you might be in school a little bit, but it's probably not the facts. It's probably quite biased. Um, you have to give people the facts, and there's been so much misinformation in the media as well. Like, and even you see some very prominent, well-known nutritionists talking about a glass of red wine a day, which is complete rubbish. You know, if we've done the research on it, okay, there's a slight thing about heart health and red wine. On balance, that's negligible compared to the harm it creates everywhere else, like increasing your cancer risk and that type of stuff. So, now we have got some very clear factual information. Drink by Professor David Nutt is the best book about alcohol. And I always recommend people read that. So once you've educated yourself, then you can make an informed choice. It really is that simple. But until then, most people are misinformed, really.
Yes, and then lack of the information then makes you think, well, it's okay, it's okay, because it's advertised everywhere. And you made
Yeah,
a good point there because you see it everywhere you go to, like,
yeah,
you see alcohol in small supermarkets and big supermarkets. You see it at the airport, in the airplane. You're there, you're going through the catalog, you see it there. It's absolutely everywhere. And so it is tempting, I guess, especially when somebody is going through hard times in their lives as well. But then even if they start this habit in that hard time, when that hard time is gone, the habit continues to be there. And then it's about them becoming more aware and wanting to shift that. But I love that you said it's an informed choice once the person knows what it is about. So I know, Stephanie, that you've worked with so many different people from different walks of life. You've worked with CEOs, with people in different professions. So from all of this experience, what have you learned about these beautiful souls' habits, or about humanity in general when it comes to habits?
so what have I noticed about people and their habits? So it's really interesting about that because, like you say, I have worked with lots of different people with lots, from all walks of life, and it's the same stuff. There's none of this. You see people, doing specific programs for what's called high ticket clients. I really don't like that language at all. It makes me squirm. Um, but it's the same stuff. It doesn't matter how much money you earn, human behavior, when we're doing this type of work, I mean, obviously everybody's different, but there are so many similarities as well. That stuff around, the education piece, about the risks and problematic stuff around alcohol, how easy it is for humans to get into trouble with it because of the alleviating pain and increasing pleasure, whatever reason. And then it's about them understanding, why were they drinking? What was it giving them? What was the positive intention? Because if you take something away, we have to replace it with something. And 9 times out of 10, people are drinking for a reason, and if we can get to the bottom of that, then we can figure it out. Like, people will say to me, oh, I drink alcohol because it helps me get off to sleep. If I'm not drinking alcohol, then how am I going to get off to sleep? And it's like, okay, that's fine. We can deal with that. We can teach you how to get off to sleep. That's not a problem. Other people are drinking because it manages their anxiety, but actually it's making their anxiety worse. But in that moment, it's giving them sort of a reprieve from their anxiety. And it's like, okay, but if we can reduce your drinking, slowly, because the anxiety is, then we can figure out what the root cause is of the anxiety, and we can get you some support for that, so, but there's so many different reasons, but it's all very similar. It's that, what's the positive intention? Can we get to the root cause? A lot of it is about small steps and teaching people how to look after themselves. Then you get into things around assertiveness and confidence and people pleasing and boundaries, which is really common. Connection, what sort of the quality of the connections that we're getting. And then you get into stuff like, are people living life the way they really want to live their life? But you don't really get to that until somebody's sort of 6 months, maybe even longer, alcohol free. That's what can be really interesting. Like, we can be working with someone and they've been a year alcohol free, and then they just have a complete meltdown. Everything's been fine, and then all of a sudden it's not fine. It's like, because life's not working for me and there's stuff I need to change. And that can be really scary.
It can be scary, and then especially in those moments, you really
Yeah.
need that support more than ever because
Yeah.
imagine if somebody was alcohol free for 6 months and then they had one drink and then they go into this spiral of like, oh my God, am I going back to the same habit? What would you say to someone going through something like this? What would be your answer like after 6 months having a drink and then, oh, what am I doing here? Am I going to drink again? Like, or do I just stop, or like what happens from there?
Well, I suppose it depends on lots of things. It depends on somebody's goal, and their reason for their goal. So, for instance, if somebody needs to be alcohol free because it's really problematic and it's high risk for themselves, and then if they have a drink, whether that's a lapse, if just a moment, it's part of the change process, and it's about how you manage the risk and how people get back on track. But for most people, they won't need to be abstinent. They
Mm,
might have a goal to be abstinent, but they don't need to be. It's like it's not life threatening if they have a drink. It's not the end of the world. They might feel a bit rubbish because they set themselves a goal of being alcohol free and then they've had a drink. A really common one is somebody's been alcohol free for a period of time, they go on holiday, they start drinking, they come home, they're struggling to get back on track, that type of stuff. People give themselves such a hard time because they've set themselves this goal. And also, we've got this real old fashioned language stuff around 12 step, which is like, we must be abstinent, when actually, a lot of people don't need to be abstinent. If you're having an occasional drink, then that's really not the end of the world. If you're able to have a drink and enjoy it and leave it, and leave it at that. The problem is, if you're drinking sort of larger amounts. But and a lot of that is about people give themselves a hard time. It's like, oh my God, like really giving themselves a hard time. It's like, no one died, nobody got arrested. You know how to do this, you've done this before. Let's go back to the beginning, regroup. We call it the bicycle of change. So it's
mm,
relapse is actually on the cycle of change, but that just makes you think it's a cycle and people are going round and round. But actually, we like to call it the bicycle of change because we're going through these steps, but we are moving forward. And actually, lapse or relapse is a massive part of the learning because, I was 10 days in when I had my first massive relapse, and then 18 months in, and in that 10-day one, I was like, oh my God, that was horrendous. What the hell did I do that for? And
mhm,
it just reinforces why you want to be alcohol free. But also it's like, okay, why did that happen? What happened? And you can learn from it. And for me, it was about being with certain people in certain places at certain times of day. And it's like, okay, I need to be really vigilant about that stuff. And then 18 months later, it was the same again. It was like, oh my God, that's horrendous. I don't ever want to feel like that. So it reinforces it. And you're like, well, what happened? Okay, I was really tired, had a lot going on. I need to sort myself out. I need some support. There's always something to be learned from it.
absolutely. And then when you think about, I love the term bicycle of change because
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
I just love it. And this is always happening because you can't expect for every single day to be the same. It would be boring, really, to have a very identical day after day after day. And so I love that this is kind of giving this understanding and compassion to people. And talking about compassion, what would you say is the role of compassion and self-compassion in this journey for someone who wants to really improve their lives and habits?
Say it's one of the essential components for sure, because if I had a penny for every time I spoke to someone about, okay, you need to stop giving yourself a hard time. Like, you're a human being, you're doing really well. Like, you did 60 alcohol-free days, you had a drink. Like, so what? Come on. That's like 99% on an exam. It's that type of thing. I'd be a millionaire if I had a penny every time I said that. It's just amazing. So that compassion piece, that being kind to yourself piece, that, it's that frame of being objective, of not internalizing it. It's like, okay, I'm a human being. I've got into trouble with alcohol because of, this is a not a personal situation. This is a societal situation. because we live in a time of our lives where a drug is readily available and aggressively marketed to us. And then it's like, okay, well, I've learned about it and I can make an informed choice and then I can support myself to do that. So it's like we go back to the learning frame, and it's just then learning about yourself and learning about alcohol, and you keep moving forward with that. And then, there's absolutely no need to give yourself a hard time. And it kicks in quite early, I think, that the need for self-compassion and kindness in so many different ways, that how you talk to yourself, but also how you manage the behavior change process. One of my volunteers, she talks about it. She does Slimming World, and she says it's like when you buy a bunch of flowers and one of the flowers dies, you don't throw the whole bunch of flowers out. Whereas in the alcohol-free space, what you tend to see is, "Oh, I did 3 months alcohol-free and I had a drink. What's the point?" And it's like, hang on a minute.
Yeah,
What
oh
is
my
that?
God.
I'm useless, I'm rubbish, I'm a failure. No, you're not. You're a human being. Like,
I love that analogy. That's actually a really good vision,
yes.
example to keep in mind, because
Yeah.
if you just relaxed for at that moment and you had a drink, that doesn't mean you have to throw away 3 months of like work or
Yeah.
work on yourself and connection with yourself as well. To everyone who's watching us, please check out the description of this video to know how you can connect with Stephanie, to see the amazing work that she's doing. She has a book as well that you can buy and read, and just connect with her and with her world, especially if you're in this space of needing the support to go through a transition maybe in your life or a challenging moment in your life. So, Stephanie, for someone who's maybe listening and they're thinking, you know what, I think I I need to make this change. What would you say could be the first small step that they can do today to start that process?
Couple of things. So depending on how people learn, so one of them, if you like reading books or listening to books, I would say Get Drink by Professor David Nutt. And yes, it's a factual book, and yes, it can be quite heavy, but that is the best book for facts around alcohol. And if you can literally just read for 5 minutes a day or listen for 5 minutes a day and just make that a habit. But if that's not your jam, then, get an app. Try Dry are one of the favorite apps sort of in my space that people talk about, but there are lots of apps out there. And just start recording how much you're drinking, because then it's about being honest with yourself about how much you're drinking. And get some support. If it doesn't have to be with me, but if you want to reduce or you're curious about reducing, and I always say to people, like, if I end up talking to people and they want to know, do you think my drinking is a problem? If I just randomly meet people in the street for a coffee or something, like, well, I don't know, do you think it's a problem? I don't want to do an assessment with them sort of at the bar. But I always say to people, if you're not sure, just have a couple of weeks off,
Mm.
and see how you feel. Obviously, the caveat with that is if you're a daily dependent drinker, you can't just stop drinking suddenly and you'll need to get specialist help. But, for a lot of people, just do a week or 2 weeks without alcohol and then see how you feel. And if you're not able to do that, then get some support.
Mm, thank you so much for that. Thank you for your beautiful wisdom and for your presence here today, Stephanie. To everyone who's watching us, if you're new to our channel, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, like this video, let us know your thoughts, and check out the description of this video to know how you can connect with Stephanie and myself. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.